not staying on site. I know what the hotel said is for those of us who are staying on site, anywhere we are, simply put in your last name and your room number. So we will confirm again for the day pass for those who are just joining us for a few sessions, how you will do that, okay? But in the meantime, the persons who have on the shirts with the eLearn Jamaica, they are here to help you in whatever way they can to the best of their ability, okay? All session moderators, these are persons for the, who are helping us to coordinate the sessions. They're to meet in the speakers room, North Tower, at 10:40. So that's immediately after the panel discussion. We're also inviting all presenters, okay, to be at the speakers room, presenters room, at least 20 minutes before their session. So we're just reminding persons as they come in, all right? And as you can appreciate for presenters, we encourage everybody to have sent in their pictures and all that, but there may be persons who are coming, we still need to know you, okay? So please be there. All right, and then we will continue to remind you, send out the word, our conference is beyond us here. Now that we have media, let's get our colleagues on board. So for now, those are the initial announcements. Hope as you get settled in as we go along, that, you will enjoy the facilities also of the hotel in the little time that we allow. And I will remind you again, immediately we finish here, we need to move across to the North Tower so that we can walk through and have a look at the wonderful exhibits that are there. And as you always know with a conference, there are always giveaways, there are always goodies, but there are lots of things for us to do also on the North Tower. So we continue to say, welcome. We're glad you're here. We will help you with the health part in terms of the exercise and all of that. And so we continue to move back and forth from this area to the North Tower. And we just enjoy all that God has given us, all that He has blessed us with, our minds, our intellect, and all our being. So welcome again. We now announce that Conference 2016 has begun. Okay? At 9:45, which is a few minutes, well, let me put it to maybe just 9:50, we will just set up to have our panel discussion on readiness for e-learning. So I urge you, do not bother to leave your seats because we're about to keep rolling. All right? So thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. If there's any burning question as we step off the podium, please contact us because we are here to try and make sure that you get the best of the experience. Thank you.
listening. Okay. Let me tell you the story of that guy.
We're just awaiting Mrs. Michelle McCoy, who is making her way from the front desk of the hotel just to join us. So just a few seconds, please. You came down the stairs? She's coming? It's you. Take a deep breath, take a deep. Okay, come. It comes straight, okay. Right, we don't have no landline.
Well, we just invite Mrs. McCoy to take a deep breath and join us on the stage here. As just remarking to my colleagues, yeah, just press it that way, take a deep breath. As remarking to my colleagues that in Jamaica, traditionally we have used landmarks when we are driving, around the corner, the big guinea tree, the cotton tree, all of that. So, as we just try to help persons to navigate the hotel, where we don't have reference to those colorful landmarks. Okay, we're here. All right, ladies and gentlemen, we present to you our panel discussion, Readiness for E-Learning, and it's really a conversation, a brief conversation with an august panel of stakeholders who will share varying perspectives, given their functional roles, but also their personal and professional experiences. So help me to welcome, in turn, and I just call your names and then we'll say a little bit more. Let me just start from my extreme right. Mrs. Michelle McCoy, who joined us, and she catches her breath, right? I just go through, indicate who they are, and then we'll come back to each just to share a little bit about themselves. So Mrs. McCoy will represent the perspective of the online instructor and the faculty liaison, or what we call the liaison, with the other units of the organization. She's from University of Technology, Jamaica. And then immediately beside her, we have Mr. Kerry Watts, who is representing the perspective of not only the Ministry of Education in terms of the National ICT Competency Framework, but he's also a Senior Education Officer in the Media Services Unit. To my immediate right, we have Dr. Ellen Campbell-Grizzle, who will represent the perspective of a faculty dean and also a senior administrator. She's from the University of Technology, Jamaica, has been a pioneer in the university's own initiatives to roll out health science programs across the Caribbean. To my left is Mrs. Norma Williams, who will represent the perspective of an educational technologist, the EdTech Jamaica. She probably wears the logo. She's the Dean of the Faculty of Education at the College of Agriculture, Science and Education, and she in her own right is a lecturer also involved with online for educational technology. And joining us also by Skype is Dr. Winsome Greenwood, who represents again an online instructor perspective. She's from the Northern Caribbean University, an assistant professor there, and has taught several years for online in various areas, including business. I apologize to you for not having the learner perspective because that person was not able to make it. However, all that we do do here, we are mindful that it is for the learner, and we are really facilitators, hopefully guides on this side. So I just pause here to acknowledge, if I could just get a response from Dr. Greenwood that she's aboard. Dr. Greenwood. Can we have her coming? Can we hear her? All right. We will continue to have introductions. I did make contact with her, spoke with her directly, so we know as soon as she's aboard, we will hear from her. And so I'm proud that we are able to even use simple Skype connection to facilitate persons, whether they're here live or to the extent that they can join us from wherever they are in the world. All right, let me just go back through now, and I just do it in the order. I just invite for just 2 minutes Mrs. Michelle McCoy to, again, just speak about her specific role as part of her introduction, and anything about the experience and the outstanding achievement that she has facilitated or initiated herself in e-learning. So over to you, Mrs. McCoy. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Barry. Good morning, everyone. I apologize again for being late. Well, as Dr. Bartley Bryan pointed out, my role is that of an instructor as well as the faculty's distance learning officer. And what that means is that it is one of our roles to ensure that the platform is ready not just for the learners but also for the instructors. How do I do that and how do we operate? We start out with orientation, basic orientation. So many of us as teachers, we're fearful of the things that we're not familiar with. So we bring the veils down on what exactly e-learning is and how it benefits not us as the teachers alone, but also the students. So we start with orientation, and orientation starts in-house, but we also have an establishment, the Distance Learning Office, which brings one-on-one training to the lecturers. The other thing that I do as the DL officer for my faculty is that in addition to the training, I provide visual handouts, step-by-step guide, which makes the process a little easier for the lecturers. So they bring it up each time so that they can see what to do, what not to do, and so forth. The aspect of preparation goes a little bit further than just training for me. One of the things that I do is I ensure that I keep abreast, I keep current of what's going on. So I engage myself in workshops, so in seminars. I still do online courses every now and again. I move beyond just the online platform that we use, and I go beyond using what works for the students. I think one of the things that we need to be aware of is that we have to be practical in our approach. We need to look at our context, our students, and determine, does this work? And we test it. If it works and can be modified, we modify it. If it cannot, we throw it out and look for the next thing. So we are driven by research. We don't simply say, oh, others have done this. We test it ourselves, and we collect the data and see how well students respond and how well it works, how well it makes the process easier. So essentially, that's what we've been doing in my faculty, and we have quite a number of things that work, and we've been documenting it because documentation is also very important.
Thank you, Mrs. McCoy. That's from the instructor perspective. Let me just ask Mr. Watts just to jump in there, because we're talking about National ICT Competency Framework, but his own personal experience also. Thank you for 2 minutes.
Good morning, everyone. Well, I'm from the Media Services Unit, and more specifically, I supervise the Educational Technology section in that unit, and have done my own research in the area of ICTs. And the ministry, over time, has realized for some time that we need a policy, and first we developed a policy in which this ICT could be framed, because the 21st century requires quite a bit. Requires the teacher who is at the center of this thing to change. It requires students to be focused a particular way and all that comes with that. So we have been working quite assiduously at getting policies in place that will guide the entire ecosystem that is required for using ICT's tools in the entire educational system. That ecosystem is a massive one. It requires infrastructure. It requires training of teachers, and it requires a cultural shift in all that we do for us to move forward in the 21st century. And that is some of the things we have been working on at the Media Services Unit. The Media Services Unit, however, its direct work involved with another central part of the ICT process, which is the production of resources that goes along with the infrastructure for students and teachers in the educational system. So that's where we are.
The what? All right, Dr. Grizzle, just for 2 minutes.
Are you hearing me? Yes. Morning, everybody. I'm just so very pleased to be here. Such a break from what we normally would be doing at this time as graduation approaches. But so it's a nice respite for me, and I want to thank the organizers for asking me to sit on this panel. I speak as an outgoing dean, and I speak also as a health professional who was responsible for a college. And when I started my tenure in 2011, the mandate was made very clear that we were a national university and we had to open up opportunities in the health sciences for our Jamaican people. And that we were also aiming to have some regional space that we were going to occupy that as well. So when I did the look at the situation, I recognized a lot of contemplation had taken place. And I felt that we were near enough to start some implementation in terms of getting one complete course of study online. That would make it the first online course of study that the University of Technology would have. And so the challenge was, for me anyway, how to do. Because we had about 1,300 students in the college at the time, and our big aim was to get to 2,000. So how to get to 2,000 using online? In fact is we had no choice because we had limited space in which to expand. So for us, it was a very logical and important activity to engage in. So we looked at what was possible, and we recognized that there's a market for health professionals who had done diplomas and certificates at UTech, but who would want to know to get to a first degree. And in order to get that done, we had to look at what was existing within the university. And the challenges were there. When we looked, the challenges were there in terms of the technological support, the mindset, and all of the other issues, the will, determination to get it done. And I would come in to say that it was the determination is a very important factor in getting it done. Knowing your staff, another important factor in getting it done, and knowing the student population and their needs, where they are, where they want to get to in getting it done.
All right. So we're getting quite a bit. We're going to explore in the time we have. But let me just invite Mrs. Norma Williams just to share of her personal experience, her role in the field of e-learning. Thank you.
Good morning. The educational technologists are members of faculty of 9 institutions, including Edna Manley College. We are mainly teacher trainers, and through the initiative of the e-learning and the Joint Board of Teacher Education, we were attached to the University of British Columbia in Vancouver, where we did a master's in educational technology. That is to set the framework, the theoretical framework for whatever we do. Now, this master's has helped us to begin to create, to collaborate, and to share and lead in many of the activities that we have, that the government has engaged us in. We have so far put on with eLearning 2 symposiums, and now we are with EduVision. I think that we have created that kind of connection in terms of the readiness agenda for us to link theory to real-world activities. Because one of the things we have realized is how important integrating ICT is for nation building, for progress, economic progress, that we are preparing teachers to teach persons who are going out into industry, and we are, in fact, education is playing catch up with industry. So we have to prepare our students in that way. As a result, we have created 2 main courses in the teacher education program, the Introduction to ICT and Education and Technology. We have adjusted educational technology to take into consideration Web 2.0 tools that are used in everyday life. We are, in fact, trying to revolutionize even the idea of using certain devices in classes, smartphones and so on, that it should become accepted that students should be connected to whatever is happening throughout the world, because networking is a very important part of who we are in the global arena. Now, other activities that we have engaged in is we've written 2 manuals, participated in the writing of 2, the Tablet in School project, and we have participated in the training of those individuals. Recently, throughout the summer, many of us were engaged in the ICT integration and portal training, as well as, I thought that Mr. Watt would mention it, the creation of the UNESCO framework, because for us to use technology, it's not just about using a device, it's about ensuring that there are levels of learning that we can manage, that in fact we can identify where students are at a particular time based on the competencies that they display. So that's what our role is, basically, in preparing Jamaica to enter this world of technology. Thank you.
Thank you. So even as Mrs. Williams spoke, she shared about the broader EdTech Jamaica in terms of a body that exists that is trying to mobilize persons in terms of this role, okay? And she mentioned the 9 colleges. We know then that there are other education and technologies, maybe at the universities and other institutions who maybe need to be part of this organization. Let me just pause here. Do we have Dr. Greenwood online? Okay, we'll continue. Okay, so some key words were just shared, and I wanted to explore further just by, asking some general questions. And what I'm about to ask or to share, just to put it in a context, a broader context of the national standards for distance learning, which the standards was launched actually, quality standards, was launched in 2014 by the University Council of Jamaica. So I wanted us to be mindful that all that we share here, that it is within that context. And I'll just quickly mention that the 9 standards that the UCJ has or is promoting and will hold us accountable to, it includes governance, academic programs, curriculum materials, learner services and support, learner assessment, achievement and satisfaction, technology services, human resource management, financial management, advertising and promotion, research and development. 9 priority areas that would be examined for anything to do with e-learning in terms of its readiness. So as you listen, you may have realized that e-learning is really about a total systems approach. We can't just press a button and things happen. There are several things, several elements, structure, the staffing, the systems that have to be in place, the skills that would have to be in place to facilitate this process. So I'm going to open up to our panelists to say, given the increasing demand for tertiary education that's happening across the region, given the demand for flexibility, okay? Our students are saying we need things, we need flexible access. We can't travel the same way, we can't leave our jobs, we can't move across the Caribbean in the same way for the few tertiary institutional, the educational opportunities that are there. Then there are some things we're grappling with. So I'll maybe start off with Dr. Grizzle to say, from the perspective of an institutional administrator, from the aspect of an interest, an idea, maybe just in a few seconds or so, just to tell us, how did you move from the idea, the interest, the mandate, the imperative that you shared before? How did you start? For any college out here, how did you kick off from just having this idea? Thank you.
Let me just share my experience. I did the SWOT analysis, basically, and to measure or to get a sense of the strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, threats for the College of Health Sciences. Having done that and having had I think a greater understanding of what I would be up against as a new dean coming in, I decided to form a team with a cross-university team, across all the standards that were named by Dr. Jeanette. Finance, facilities management, you name it. Every department was in the university was a part of this team. Dr. Jeanette was a part of the team as well, because she is the head of the distance learning operations within the university. So that was how we worked on the internal. On the external student side, I visited about 6 Caribbean countries and Belize to either talk to the heads or whoever could give me students. Some came through projects with EU funding, others came on their own, others were funded by their ministries. And then in Jamaica, we had the students ready this was a pharmacy program. It's a pharmacy program, we call it pharmacy completion. So we pretty much started out very shakily. I'm not going to pretend that the first effort was not kind of traumatic for us. It was in fact very difficult. But you know what? Today we have graduated 2 cohorts. We have students in Canada, the USA, Belize, Bermuda, all over doing this program. All of our graduate programs since then are all on some kind of online platform. So we have students from Bermuda and so on, and the Bahamas doing graduate programs at University of Technology. So what started with a shaky start, I would say, is now a success, I think, that will be built on going forward.
Thank you. I'll just ask Mr. Watts to jump in, because he spoke a little bit of the ecosystems. And so I'll ask him, even with the ICT competency framework, to broaden that, to speak to it. Because what we're talking about is the pre-planning, the advanced planning before we even get down to the online instructors and the learners. And so even from your experience, I mean, how many years do you start being ready before that first course is up, before the registrants are in? But from the ministry's perspective, how ready do you also anticipate from a national perspective? Thank you.
Okay, good. I mentioned earlier that we are looking at policy at the Ministry of Education to ensure that everything's set within specific standards. And I want to look a little deeper at the competency framework for teachers, because without the teachers at the center of our connected learning, then we will be in problem. The teachers have to be at a certain level of competencies. They have to have the competence to train, to teach, to do the assessment. All of that is part of the standard system that will be ensured. So follow on, eLearning Jamaica perhaps pushed us very fast as they began putting tablets into schools. There are a lot of training has to be done, and we know that the entire system will require a certain level of competence for the teachers to be teaching in a connected learning environment. So we set about dealing with the policy first, the policy, a broad policy of ICT in education. We looked at a master plan. And when we finished the master plan, we realized that 80% of the programs in there was for teacher training, and hence evolved the National Competency Framework for Teachers. And what we're saying with the National Competency Framework is that the teacher should be at least be effective and efficient in delivering or using the ICT tools for educational delivery throughout the system. And we have worked with persons from all the colleges, and my colleague just mentioned that she's one of the persons working on the competency framework. And we hope, we have taken into consideration the various levels of competencies already in the system, and so that persons will not have to start at the very basic. Those who are at a level already, and again here standards come in, we're hoping that there will be assessment to assess teachers where they are in the system, and they can start at the level where the policy suggests that they should start, and so on.
Thank you, Mr. Watt. And so, as we hear, the teacher plays a critical role. Many of us have heard about moving from sage on the stage to guide on the side. That has become such a phrase. But Dr. Grizzle mentioned we have to move beyond contemplation to implementation. We have to put the things in place to make it happen. And so I'm also going to ask first Mrs. McCoy and then Mrs. Williams to jump in here in terms of the role of this instructor. Maybe there's a debate. I know Mr. Watt said that person is at the center of it all. So I would say that's a central facilitator, because ultimately we say the learner is at the center. So not a contradiction. I think maybe it's just the emphasis, the relative emphasis and the roles. But I'm going to ask Mrs. McCoy to jump in here. Given the institutional framework, given the structures, given your entire experiences of all that needs to happen, it's not the same as face-to-face teaching. Okay, so how do you get ready and how do you cope with the challenges of an institution that may still be brick and mortar, moving at a different pace than where you as an instructor, you're trying to take the teaching-learning relationship with students using technology? Just jump in, no holds barred. Thank you.
It's so interesting that you asked that question, because I have a passion for teaching, and I mix that passion with the technology. And the institution in which we reside, well, most institutions are still strongly brick and mortar. So you still have that mind frame that says you go to a physical classroom, you have a printout of the paper, you test the students in class, you write the information down. And one of the things that I grapple with is, how do we, step by step, move to that point where we are more open to the online aspect? I have found that we start at below zero. I have students, and the assumption tends to be that, oh, we live in a digital world, and the digital world means that they can do this and they can do that, and we have natives and we have immigrants and so forth. But the interesting thing is, what is it that they are skilled at? What exactly can they do well? We will find, the literature will show us, our research will show us that our students, our lecturers themselves, are more inclined to the social aspect of it, not so much the educational component. So how do we move to that point where we get them in a classroom to start thinking about the e-learning aspect, to move the shift from pen and paper 100% of the time, to consider that aspect where, just as though you log on to check your Facebook post or you are on WhatsApp, how do I move to that natural or almost immediate response that I need to log on and post some work. I need to log on and see what is there to be done. I start with the profiling. I know that my students come from different backgrounds, and every class I have, I find out a little more about them. I do it officially, I give them a questionnaire, or I ask as an informal session. Okay guys, we're gonna try a couple things this semester, but I need to know a little bit about where you are. I do the same thing with the teachers that I work with. We are here, we have to use the online, it's a part of our course, but I need to know how you feel about it, how much have you done, where do you see yourself, do you still gravitate to pen and paper only, why? So I start with profiling, and I find that the profile brings up what the strengths are, what the weaknesses are, where I could possibly go with not just the students, but with the persons that I work with. So I start with profiling.
Thank you. And as Mrs. McCoy mentioned, the profiling that an instructor may do, then we are aware that, especially as we look at the UCJ standards, there is a profile that has to happen long before when an institution decides to even think about setting up an e-learning system. And so we have to look across the country in terms of the access levels, okay, across our country, the infrastructure that is there. And that is some of the things I'm expecting in the national policy also that will come out. But I'll also bring Mrs. Williams in here in terms of a profile also that has to be developed as the educational technologists seek to facilitate the use of a technology as a means to an end, not an end in itself. I invite Mrs. Williams just to tell us how does she help to make that happen, or what is really the experience and what's its role in readiness for the use of the technology. Thank you.
Well, one of the elements that we look at when we are even showing our students how to write lesson plans is that the first thing you do is to analyze your learner. So it means that you will have to have an understanding of where your learner is, and we use, in the teacher education, we use the Assure model to present the lesson planning and so on. So before you begin to select, you need to know what it is that you are going to get into. What I find when we teach our students who are not as savvy, even if they are savvy with technology and they're in a class, so we may be teaching a blended course, which means that part of it is done online and part face-to-face. Many times when they're to go in the course before class, it is when they come to class that they will say, oh, well, I forgot to do it, and so on. Because they're still thinking that to be participating in a course, they have to be in a classroom. So being on the bus and being able to enter the course and write a response to a discussion, they don't take it as participating in their learning. So it is over time that they really come to understand what it is that we need to do. So we have to be informing them not just about using the technology, but about the approach to teaching and learning. Also that they think that, and I know a lot of people think that learning online is something easy. But actually it's harder. When I show my students that there are timestamps, for example, that when I look at the analytics for the course and see that everybody went on the night before class or just earlier this morning, they're surprised. I show it to them and I say, see, I know that you all came on, so you left everything until this time. It has a timestamp also so that you know who posted, when they posted, and so on. So if you are to participate at a particular time, you must do that. And one of the things I omitted to say to you is that we who did the masters did it completely online, and there was a time difference, and we learned so much about the fact that Canada was 2 hours ahead of us, so that when it said that we had to submit by 11:59, that we could actually submit 1:59 in Jamaica time. So we learned a lot of the things that were outside of what was being taught to us, and that we had to develop certain competencies. And a very important part of what I talk about tech savvy, but we also need to convey to our students that you don't have to be a computer specialist to do this. I use myself as an example. I'm a social studies teacher. I have nothing. In fact, the first time I went on in the course, I could barely attach something to my email, and I've come out of it with a high level. So I've traveled far in all of this, and this is the understanding that we need to have. So when we profile our learners, we must be able to have them evaluate how far they can move. And it's very important for us, especially for people, we talk about lifelong learning, for people who have been out of the classroom and say, oh, I can't bother to do anything, I'm not able, I have children and so on. All of this, I have so many things that I would like us to talk about people coming in, people who have smartphones and sit on the roadside, that they could be participating in a class. Ladies who are at home cooking dinner and so on could be participating in their class. In fact, they could be Skyping and having a discussion and all of that. And it opens up so many opportunities. And I think that is the importance. We need to have children understand, we need to have parents understand, we need to have everybody understand that when you're online, there's no age barrier. You are there. Your presence is there as a participant. And so I've said so many things that may or may not hit the mark of what Dr. Bartley-Bryan said.
No, I think, and I'm going to open up for maybe one or two questions, but I think as all panelists, the idea here is just to really show you the range of things that are involved and that there's a structure. I always say the planning and the pre-planning and then the contingency plan for the plan that you had already planned because of all the factors and variables that are involved. So even as Mrs. Williams spoke, it is wide, it is a total system. She mentioned some words. She touched on open schooling, which I'm hoping that a little later in our program we have Dr. Bala for short from Commonwealth of Learning, which is one of the agencies that really facilitates open schooling across the world, to speak more to us here. Even in Jamaica, you mentioned about women on the roadside just being involved. So we're talking about a paradigm shift, more than a paradigm shift, a whole way of life. We're talking about being able to use the technology to reflect thought, to reflect technique, for it to be more than a tool, for it to reflect a process, and in fact it's becoming a way of life. It's also a place to be. It's also becoming a person. So it is really talking about stepping back and looking at how the technology can be a means to an end and establishing what that end is first. Yes. And then we decide what's the appropriate technology. So the idea here was just to have persons from the different perspectives to share that it's not impossible, but it has to be well thought out, and it has to be planned and integrated, and especially when you are in an institution that is well established in its traditional approach, it means then that we have to have a change management plan for the introduction of the technology-mediated delivery, and to have monitoring and evaluation as we go along, so that we can have what we call a learning organization. We learn from our errors, we learn from our failures, we learn from the shaky start. So there's a lot involved, and we wouldn't say any one person has, done it all. Okay? I'm going to invite some comments, and if there are others in the audience, we apologize for not having University of the West Indies representatives. Contact was made, and so that would be another angle in terms of a regional presence, and as they move towards a single campus space. And so we invite persons from the audience, and we just take a few questions based on what we shared here, because we're also mindful of the time. So let me invite Mrs. Crawford to make a comment or ask a question. She's from eLearning Jamaica. Thank you.
I'm not sure whether it's a question or comment or what it is. you know, when we have the face-to-face and so on, we operate in a certain way. Children know that they go home, they do their homework, they come back and they ask a question in class. So those are your contact hours. And you may say, okay, this needs a little bit more explanation, so meet me after school, and that's your extra contact. But there are specific things. Now let's imagine a situation where you have all the internet, all the broadband, all the Wi-Fi that you could ever want. All your teachers are onto this thing and they're sending out podcasts and text blasts and all kinds of stuff. And your children all bring their tablet to school. So everybody is on, everybody is. How do you manage? Because this means the thing is now real time. It's not when I reach the school on Monday at 10 o'clock, I talk to teacher about this. A child has the child with the smartphone in the bus want the answer right away. How does your framework say that that is to be managed? I remember I went to I don't remember if you're there, Norma, up in Canada. Yeah, up in Vancouver when you had your award ceremony. And there was this particular prof who everybody got up and clapped him when he came into the room. Why? Because he was online no matter what time of night you were asking questions, he was there to answer you. That is my question.
All right, so I'm not sure who wants to take it. My phrase is managing the expectation of the instant. So any takers who will respond to that?
I just want to quickly talk about an approach known as the flipped classroom, which is an approach where we're expecting that the student is going to garner most of the information outside of the classroom. And then in the classroom, what you would have given them as homework. Because sometimes when students are doing homework, you find that there's a higher level of difficulty for the questions that they take home. So that would come into the classroom. So in fact, there is a way of managing all of this. And there are times when you actually want the student to be able to go search quickly. But all of this has to be organized. So there are approaches that can be used to manage the way the technology is to be used in the classroom.
So Mrs. Williams is jumping in terms of the role of the student changing. That the student also has to take responsibility, and you say garnering information and all of that. So the teacher is not the sole source of information. So some expectations have to be managed here. Mrs. McCoy first and then Dr. Grizzle, yes?
I'm just following up on Mrs. Williams' point, especially where it concerns the instant. I need it now. I think too that what the teachers need to do is in that first class, before we start in earnest, is to set those expectations, set what the parameters are. We will have some classes where you get immediate responses, but there are those which we call asynchronous, which will come after. So once that is set, and students are reminded, they forget easily. Once we remind them over and over that this is the case, we then put those strategies, those approaches in place. So we may have a section online where the responses come not just from the teacher, because now the teacher is not just the sole owner of knowledge, but you have others sharing, and that expands more than just the knowledge base. It expands the lifelong learning that you talk about. It expands and strengthens those qualities as well. So you have forum sessions, you have whiteboards, collaborative boards where that can take place. You also have increasing numbers of auto-rated activities. So the minute they complete those, they get the feedback. They get not just the tick that says this is correct, but then as lecturers, as teachers, we'll have to input the feedback, which would show why this isn't correct, why this is correct. And so I think it's a matter of feeding that instant strategically. We say at the beginning, this can happen, this will happen, this should happen. I am not the only person. We have other experts here in the room who will also provide that kind of information that you need now or later.
So let me just, so Mrs. McCoy, you're also talking about tools.
Yes.
You mentioned using tools to satisfy the expectation. So the teacher does not have to answer everything in person, because the systems and the technology includes processes and tools that can help the learner to get feedback also, and that can be automated. All right, Dr. Greaves was about to say something, then Mr. Watts. Yes.
Very quickly. As an academic manager, there is a budget. And my staff were quick to tell me that how are they going to be paid for this? So we had to set some ground rules, and they're set with the students within the limits of time that the college allows. So the lectures and presentations are archived, so the students can actually go back and refresh. And then there are talk sessions according to strict numbers of hours. But you know what has happened? The process has liberated the lecturers. And so the money argument is not as strong now as it used to be, because they are able to be at home and they can teach from home. And they can be supervising something else rather than being in the college and so on. So there are benefits on both sides, but as a manager of the process, there's a financial limit, and you have to set some limits for the interaction.
All right, so Mr. Watts may be coming in timely there
Okay,
again, the national
Crawford, well, I agree with Mrs. Williams and my colleague here that you require, flip the classroom is one, so on. But I understand Mrs. Crawford's, because if we are going to encourage thousands of other people outside of the structured classroom to enter this, and I would just like to bring to your attention the competency, the framework, one of our competencies is knowledge deepening. And that in that process, the teacher is supposed to be, or the facilitator, which is a better word, is supposed to develop the ability to transform the learning environment, whichever it is. And then I'll point you to two medium-term solutions. We are in the second generation of what we call cognitive computing. So Mrs. Crawford, when you're beginning, later on you begin not only tablets and smart boards, but we have to think about cognitive computing. And then there is social computing. And those will present to the learners the kind of feedback, albeit it will be inputted by the teacher. So the teacher's role will be changing. So all the data and all the possible questions will be asked, will be placed in a database so that the students will be able to get the correct answer. And one is social computing, and they will merge to become one thing that will assist students all over the world to get real time. I'll just give you a story. IBM built a computer to play chess that beat the Russian chess master. And then after they're done with that, what did they do with it? They throw all the medical data into it. And now it's better able to diagnose a medical problem than any doctor.
Artificial intelligence. All right, folks, we're just at the tip of the iceberg. There's so much more. This session alone could run on for the entire day because it has all those facets. But we are just hoping that you have some questions beginning. Well, you'd have come with quite a lot of questions. Many of you are practitioners yourselves, have some experience and expertise, and there's so much more to be said. But we will pause here for today. There will be opportunities throughout the rest of the conference for you to share and to bring in your own ideas. But we're going to urge you to go for your break and walk across to the Northern Tower where there are the booths, there is the exhibition. I myself will walk over there so that we can all look at what is possible, the products, go to the playground, and in your own way, think of your innovator's pitch. So for today, for Readiness for eLearning, what we tried to do was just to look at varying perspectives, and if nothing else, just to remind you, it is a total system approach. just to remind you that the technology is more than just the tool. That what we're dealing with here is a whole thought process. It's a technique. We have to come up with the strategies. That we have to set in place the proper infrastructure. We have to plan, as Dr. Grizzly reminds us of, for the limited resources that we have. We have to look for open education resources, open source software, and yes, we need the skills to be able to manage those as we press along, so that the use of technology is a means to an end. It's not an end in itself. And there's so much more we could explore. But thank you for joining us for this first aspect of our conference 2016. And I urge you to be fully involved in the rest of the day and tomorrow. So thank you again. And we are available wherever you see us to continue to share with you of resources and as best as we are able to help you. So thanks again. And I'm sorry, Dr. Greenwood, we weren't able to connect.
She just couldn't hear
to respond. So we apologize for that. But we are going to move beyond even this conference, and you will hear more by Friday of even follow-up and some other initiatives that we have thinking, proposing, and we will invite your feedback on that. So thank you again. And the rest of the program will resume. We take a break now, and then we ask you to be sure to be involved in our concurrent sessions, which will begin at 11:15. So for now, go ahead, enjoy the exhibits, technology playground. Break is over this side, but break is also over the northern tower. So please get involved.
All right, hello. I know some people are looking forward to getting this information. I just want to give the Wi-Fi password really quickly. Sorry. I'm going to give out the EduVision Wi-Fi password, right? The digital one to everybody, right? Okay, all right, copy that. Okay, it is the numeral 3. So you're just going to look up for Digicel, the Digicel Wi-Fi. So it's a numeral 3, and then everybody's trying to call me at the same time. I'm so sorry. And EduVision. So instead of EduVision, there's a 3 in place of the E, and the V is lowercase though. So it's 3DUVISION. And of course, there's an exclamation mark at the end of it. All lowercase. So 3DUVISION exclamation mark. And the Digicel, yes, the Digicel link. All right?
2 o'clock, we resume here for the opening ceremony in this room. So please remember that as we try to just move through in terms of time. So thank you very much. Have a very good day.